he demanded the frail blonde whistleblower who held his criminal empire's secrets. Instead, his heavily armed men dragged in a terrified, 250-pound night shift nurse who just wanted to eat her cold pasta in peace. It was a monumental, fatal mistake. But by sunrise, the ruthless kingpin utterly refused to let her leave. The fluorescent lights of Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital hummed with a sterile, flickering intensity that always gave Penelope Hayes a migraine by 3 a.m. At 28 years old, Penelope or Penny, to the few who bothered to ask, knew the night shift was a thankless purgatory. It was a world of bedpans, groaning patients, and the lingering scent of bleach. It was also a world where her size was a constant unspoken factor. At 250 pounds, Penny was undeniably fat. Her scrubs always hugged her wide hips a little too tightly, and her thick thighs chafed after 12 hours of relentless pacing across the linoleum floors. While the other nurses complained about broken fingernails, Penny's battles were fought in the deep aches of her swollen feet and the quiet indignity of squeezing past medical carts in narrow hallways. But she was an exceptional trauma nurse. Dr. Harrison Miller, the chief of surgery, frequently requested her for his most critical post-op patients. She had a gentle touch and eagle eye for dropping blood pressure and a calming presence that the more frantic, thinner nurses lacked. Tonight, however, Penny was just exhausted. Sitting in the break room, she unlaced her white sneakers and let out a long, heavy sigh. Her stomach rumbled. She reached for her Tupperware of leftover baked ziti when the break room door swung open. It was Jessica Brooks, a petite, conventionally beautiful nurse whose blonde ponytail swung like a pendulum. Jessica was everything Penny was not, a size 2 bubbly, and constantly texting a rotation of men. "Penny, I need a massive favor," Jessica gasped, looking uncharacteristically panicked. She was clutching a thick baby blue cardigan to her chest. "What is it, Jess? I'm on my 30-minute break," Penny replied, rubbing her temples. "I spilled iodine all over my scrub top. I have to go to the basement locker room to get my spare, but Dr. Miller needs a round of vitals done on the VIP in room 412. If he catches me off the floor, he'll write me up. Please just take my cardigan, cover my badge, and do the vitals. It will take 2 minutes." Penny frowned. Room 412 was in the isolated north wing, a VIP suite, currently guarded by 2 very large, very quiet men in cheap suits. The patient inside was a John Doe with a gunshot wound to the shoulder. "Jess, I don't like going in there. Those guys give me the creeps." "Please, Pen, I owe you. I'll buy you lunch for a week." Jessica tossed the baby blue cardigan onto the table and practically bolted out the door. "Thank you, you're a lifesaver." Muttering under her breath, Penny pushed her ziti aside. She stood up, her joints popping, and slipped Jessica's oversized blue cardigan over her broad shoulders. It barely wrapped around her ample chest, but it covered her own ID badge. Grabbing a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff, she waddled out of the break room, her heavy footsteps echoing in the silent corridor. The north wing was eerily quiet. As Penny approached room 412, she noticed something chilling. The 2 men in cheap suits were gone. Not just gone, but the heavy oak door to the VIP suite was cracked open. A smear of crimson blood stained the frosted glass. Penny's heart hammered against her ribs. Her breath hitched. Protocol, she thought. Call security. She turned on her heel to retreat to the nurse's station, but the sound of heavy combat boots hitting the linoleum froze her in place. From the stairwell emerged 4 men, dressed in tactical black gear, their faces obscured by ski masks. They moved with terrifying, lethal precision. They weren't hospital security. They were a hit squad. The leader, a towering man with cold, dark eyes, visible through the slits of his mask, pointed a suppressed pistol directly at Penny's chest. Don't make a sound. He hissed, his voice a gravelly whisper. His eyes darted to the baby blue cardigan. You the nurse assigned to 412. Penny opened her mouth, but her throat was completely dry. She shook her head frantically, stepping backward, her large frame bumping clumsily into a crash cart. The metal rattled loudly. Grab her, the leader barked. She's the one who saw the ledger. We don't have time. Wait, no, I'm not. Penny managed to scream, but a thick, leather-gloved hand clamped viciously over her mouth. Two of the men seized her arms. They were strong, but Penny's weight and sheer panic made her a difficult target. She threw her weight backward, dropping her center of gravity, a tactic she had accidentally perfected when trying to lift uncooperative patients. Jesus Christ, Lorenzo, she's heavy! One of the men grunted, struggling to secure her left arm. Help me lift her! Just sedate her and drag her out the service elevator, Lorenzo snarled. Penny thrashed wildly, her thick legs kicking out, landing a solid blow against a tactical knee pad. The man swore viciously, but the struggle was brief. A needle pierced the thick flesh of her upper arm through the blue cardigan. Within seconds, the sterile white walls of the hospital began to spin, melting into a muddy, terrifying darkness. The last thing she felt was the humiliating sensation of three grown men struggling to haul her unconscious, heavy body down the service corridor. The scent of aged leather and expensive cigars pulled Penny from the depths of her chemically induced sleep. She groaned, her head pounding with a ferocious ache. As she blinked her eyes open, the blurry world slowly sharpened into focus. She was no longer in the sterile, brightly lit hospital. She was lying on a massive mahogany desk in the center of a dimly lit, opulent library. Bookshelves lined the walls, stretching up to a vaulted ceiling, and heavy velvet drapes blocked out whatever daylight might have been outside. She tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea forced her back down. She realized her wrists were zip-tied in front of her. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. She's finally awake. The voice came from the shadows, deep, resonant, and dripping with dangerous authority. A man stepped into the amber light of the desk lamp. Penny's breath caught in her throat. He was devastatingly handsome, but in a way that screamed violence. He had sharp, aristocratic cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed by dark stubble, and eyes the color of a stormy ocean. He wore a crisp-tailored black suit that cost more than Penny's entire yearly salary. This was Damien Costa, the undisputed head of the Costa crime family. Damien walked slowly around the desk, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He stopped at her feet, his brow furrowing in profound confusion and rising anger. He looked from her round, terrified face down to her thick waist, her wide hips, and the cheap hospital scrubs straining against her curves. He slowly turned his head to the side. Lorenzo. The leader of the hit squad stepped forward from the corner of the room, peeling off his tactical mask. He looked nervous. Yes, boss. I asked you, Damien said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly soft register, to bring me the nurse from the 4th floor, the blonde, the petite one who my idiot brother confided in before he passed out, the one who has the flash drive. Boss, she was wearing the blue cardigan. The informant said, look for the blue cardigan. Lorenzo swallowed hard. She was right outside the room. Damien slammed his whiskey glass down on a side table. The crystal shattered, sending shards flying across the Persian rug. Penny flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, her heavy chest heaving with terrified sobs. Do I look like I run a charity for the visually impaired Lorenzo? Damien roared, closing the distance between him and his lieutenant in 2 massive strides. He grabbed Lorenzo by the collar of his tactical vest. The target was a 110-pound blonde. Look at her. You kidnapped the wrong goddamn woman. She fought like hell, boss. It was dark, the cardigan matched. "Get out of my sight before I put a bullet in your kneecap!" Damien snarled, shoving the man backward. Lorenzo stumbled and quickly retreated from the library, closing the heavy oak doors behind him. Silence descended on the room, broken only by Penny's ragged breathing. Damien turned his piercing grey eyes back to her. He pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling a long breath. He walked over to the desk, pulling a switchblade from his pocket. Penny shrieked, kicking her thick legs away from him. "Please, please don't kill me. I don't know anything. I was just taking a break. I was just going to eat my pasta." Damien paused the blade, hovering in the air. A bizarre, almost imperceptible flicker of amusement crossed his hardened features before vanishing behind a mask of cold indifference. "Hold still, for God's sake," he muttered. He reached out his large, warm hand, surprisingly gentle, as he grasped her trembling wrists. With a quick flick, he sliced the zip tie. Penny instantly pulled her arms to her chest, rubbing the red marks on her skin. She sat up clumsily, her weight making the antique desk creak. She felt acutely aware of how much space she took up, how messy her brown hair was, and how her fleshy stomach rolled beneath her scrubs. She had never felt so vulnerable and exposed. "What is your name?" Damien demanded, leaning against the edge of the desk, towering over her. Penelope." She stammered, tears spilling over her flushed cheeks. "Penelope Hayes." "Well, Penelope Hayes, you are a victim of my men's profound incompetence. Unfortunately for you, you've seen my face. You've seen Lorenzo's face. You know we took you from the hospital." He crossed his arms over his broad chest. "In my world, loose ends are tied up, usually with a weight around their ankles at the bottom of the bay." Penny's blood ran ice cold. "I won't say anything. I swear to God. I live alone with my cat Barnaby. I have no family. Nobody will even care that I'm gone. Just let me walk out of here. I'll forget I ever saw you." Damien studied her. He watched the way her full breasts heaved with every terrified breath, the way her soft, round face was flushed with authentic terror. In his world, women were either hardened criminals, plastic socialites, or frail, trembling waifs begging for mercy. Penelope was different. There was something intensely real about her. She was soft, abundant, and completely unpolished. Before he could respond, the heavy library doors burst open. Another man rushed in, his hands coated in thick, dark blood. "Damien, it's Dante. The stitches from the hospital tore. He's bleeding out in the east wing. The private doctor won't answer his phone." Damien's cold demeanor instantly fractured. "Show me." He ran toward the door, then stopped, looking back at Penny. You're a nurse. Get up." "What? No, Get up!" Damien bellowed, his voice vibrating off the walls. "If my brother dies tonight, I'll bury you with him. Move." Adrenaline sharp and electric surged through Penny's heavy limbs. The instinct drilled into her over years of trauma nursing took over, overriding her paralyzing fear. She slid off the desk, her feet hitting the floor with a heavy thud, and followed the two men out of the library. They sprinted down a long, opulent hallway, adorned with classical art, arriving in a sprawling modern bedroom. Lying on a king-sized mattress, ruined by crimson stains, was a younger, slightly softer version of Damien. Dante was pale, sweating profusely, and clutching his abdomen, where a crude, hurried bandage was soaked through with arterial blood. He was shot in the stomach 3 days ago. Damien explained, his voice tight with an emotion he was desperately trying to suppress. "They patched him up at a dirty clinic. It just ruptured." Penny didn't hesitate. The terrified captive vanished, replaced by Nurse Hayes. "Get away from him," she ordered, pushing past the blood-soaked henchman. She didn't ask for permission. Her tone was pure command. She dropped heavily to her knees beside the bed, tearing away the soaked bandages. "The internal sutures have given way," Penny said, rapidly, pressing her thick, strong hands firmly against the wound, using her own body weight to apply maximum pressure. Blood instantly seeped through her fingers, staining her already dirty scrubs. "I need towels, clean ones, and boiling water alcohol, a suture kit, and whatever antibiotics you have in this house. Now." The henchman stared at her, dumbfounded. "Did you not hear her?" Damien roared, kicking a chair out of the way. "Move your ass!" For the next 2 hours, the lavish bedroom became a makeshift trauma bay. Penny worked with relentless, exhausting focus. Her back ached, sweat poured down her flushed face, and her knees screamed in agony from kneeling on the hardwood floor, but she didn't stop. She directed Damien to hold clamps, forcing the ruthless Mafia Boss to follow her precise, shouted instructions. She utilized her strength, her steady hands, and her deep well of medical knowledge. When Dante flatlined for a terrifying 10 seconds, it was Penny who threw her substantial weight into the chest compressions, cracking a rib to force his heart to beat again. When it was finally over, Dante's breathing had stabilized. The bleeding was stopped, the wound resutured with clean professional precision. Penny collapsed backward, sitting heavily on the blood-stained hardwood floor. She was panting, her hair plastered to her forehead, her scrubs ruined. She felt utterly exhausted, completely drained. Damien stood at the opposite side of the bed, wiping his brother's blood from his hands with a towel. He looked down at Dante's sleeping stable form, and then slowly raised his eyes to look at the woman sitting on his floor. He had expected a liability. He had expected a clumsy, crying mess who would faint at the sight of blood. Instead, he saw a warrior disguised in soft flesh and worn-out scrubs. He watched the way her chest rose and fell, noting the fierce intelligence and bravery in her brown eyes. "He will need an IV of broad-spectrum antibiotics," Penny managed to whisper, her voice hoarse, "and constant monitoring for the next 48 hours. If he spikes a fever over 102, he needs an actual hospital, or he will go into septic shock." Damien slowly tossed the bloody towel onto a side chair. He walked around the bed and stood over her. For a terrifying moment, Penny thought he was going to pull his gun and end it right there. She had outlived her usefulness. Instead, Damien extended a large, clean hand down to her. Hesitantly, Penny reached up. His grip was iron-strong as he effortlessly hoisted her to her feet, though he had to brace himself against her weight. "You saved his life," Damien said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a strange shiver down Penny's spine. "I did," Penny breathed, looking up into his storm-grey eyes. "So, does this mean I can go home now?" Damien Costa stared at her, his gaze dropping to her soft lips, then tracing the curve of her wide hips before returning to her eyes. The cold, ruthless calculation in his stare was gone, replaced by something entirely different. Something possessive. "No," Damien said softly, stepping into her personal space. "It means you are never leaving." The next morning arrived with a blinding glare of sunlight filtering through the heavy silk drapes of a guest bedroom that felt more like a fortified bunker than a luxury suite. Penelope Hayes woke up shivering, despite the ridiculously soft Egyptian cotton sheets covering her exhausted, aching body. Her mind immediately raced back to the blood, the agonizing terror, and the cold, unyielding decree from Damien Costa. She was not allowed to leave. Pushing herself up, Penny caught a glimpse of her reflection in the gilded antique mirror across the room. She was wearing an oversized black button-down shirt that clearly belonged to Damien. It swallowed her wide shoulders, but pulled slightly at her thick hips, a jarring physical reminder of her captivity. The heavy oak door clicked open. Lorenzo, the hit squad leader, who had dragged her into this nightmare, stepped inside carrying a silver tray. He refused to meet her eyes, setting a lavish spread onto the mahogany nightstand: freshly cut tropical fruit, warm buttery croissants, a steaming carafe of dark roast coffee. "Mr. Costa requests your presence in the dining hall once you have eaten," Lorenzo muttered gruffly, immediately turning on his heel. Penny did not eat. Her stomach was tied in a tight knot of sheer anxiety. She swung her heavy legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet sinking into the plush Persian carpet. She marched out of the room, determined to negotiate her release. She was a medical professional, an employee of the state, not a mafia prisoner to be kept like a pet. She found Damien sitting at the head of a massive dining table, calmly reading a copy of the Wall Street Journal. He looked up, his storm-grey eyes raking over her disheveled appearance. He did not look angry. Rather a strange, possessive warmth flickered in his gaze. "Sit, Penelope," he commanded, smoothly gesturing to the velvet-lined chair beside him. "I want my clothes and I want a taxi," Penny demanded, her voice shaking but her stance firm. "You cannot keep me here. People will notice I am missing. The hospital administration, my landlord, the police." Damien chuckled, a dark, vibrating sound that echoed in the cavernous room. He picked up a sleek smartphone and slid it across the polished wood toward her. "Look at the screen, sweet girl." Penny hesitantly picked up the device. It displayed a fake email sent from her account to the Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital HR department, resigning effective immediately due to a sudden family emergency. Another document showed her apartment lease being terminated, the penalties paid in full from a mysterious offshore account. "I have enough money and influence to erase your existence in a single afternoon," Damien explained, taking a slow sip of black coffee. "You are officially a ghost, Penelope. My ghost." Tears of absolute frustration welled in Penny's eyes. "Why?" "Because I saved your brother. I did my job. I am fat. I am plain. I am just a nobody, night shift nurse. I don't fit into your glamorous, violent world, Damien. Let me go back to my quiet life." Damien's expression darkened instantly. He stood up the chair, scraping loudly against the floor, and closed the distance between them. He crowded her against the edge of the table, his towering frame completely engulfing her. "Do not ever call yourself plain," Damien growled, his hand reaching up to cup her soft, flushed cheek. His thumb brushed over her cheekbone with surprising reverence. "In my world, women are starving themselves, slicing their faces open for vanity, and plotting to stab me in the back at the Pierre Hotel galas. You are real. You fought my men. You saved Dante with your bare hands. You take up space, Penelope, and I find it utterly intoxicating." Penny's breath hitched. She had never been looked at like this, with such raw, unadulterated hunger. Before she could process the overwhelming confession, the dining room doors blew open. A battered, bleeding guard stumbled inside, collapsing onto the marble floor. "Boss!" The man gasped, spitting blood onto the pristine tiles. "It is the Moretti family. They breached the front gates, and they have someone with them, the blonde nurse from the hospital." Damien's jaw clenched, his eyes turning to chips of frozen ice. The real twist crashed down on Penny like a physical blow. Jessica set me up," Penny whispered in absolute horror, the pieces violently clicking together. "She gave me her blue cardigan on purpose. She knew the hit squad was coming." Damien grabbed his suit jacket, revealing the lethal silver pistol holstered beneath his arm. "The Morettis have been trying to steal my shipping ledgers for months. Your little friend was their paid informant." He looked down at Penny, his expression hardening into pure lethal focus. Stay behind me. If anyone comes through that door, I will kill them." Gunfire suddenly shattered the tranquility of the estate, rattling the crystal chandeliers overhead. Penny screamed, covering her ears, as Damien shoved her forcefully underneath the heavy bulletproof oak dining table. Dust and plaster rained down from the ceiling as automatic weapon fire chewed through the expensive drywall. Damien fired back with terrifying, calculated precision, his face a mask of absolute ruthlessness. This was the monster everyone feared, unleashing hell to protect the curvy woman cowering beneath his table. "Flank them from the west corridor," Damien roared into a tactical radio on his shoulder. "Do not let them reach the medical wing. Dante is completely defenseless." Penny's nurse instincts flared instantly, overriding her paralyzing terror. Dante was hooked up to an IV downstairs. If the power grid was compromised, his life support monitors would fail. "Damien!" she yelled over the deafening noise. "Dante's backup generator needs to be switched manually. If the grid goes down, I have to go to him." "Absolutely not, you stay right here," Damien ordered, ejecting a spent magazine and slamming a fresh one into his weapon. But a sudden massive explosion rocked the foundation of the house, plunging the entire estate into total darkness. The grid was completely gone. Penny didn't hesitate. Using her intimate knowledge of hospital emergency protocols, she scrambled out from under the table, her bare feet silently slapping against the cold, debris-covered floor. She ignored Damien's furious, panicked shouts, slipping through the servants' entrance toward the medical wing. The lower levels were pitch black and thick with acrid smoke. Penny felt her way along the walls, her heavy breathing echoing in her ears. She reached the makeshift ICU just as two men wearing Moretti insignia kicked open the opposite door. One of them held a flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark to illuminate Dante's unconscious body. The other raised a suppressed weapon. Penny had zero combat training, but she had two distinct advantages. One, a significant weight advantage. Two, a heavy steel oxygen tank beside the bed. With a primal, desperate scream, Penny grabbed the steel cylinder and hurled her 250-pound frame directly at the armed assassin. She collided with him like a runaway freight train. The sheer momentum sent them both crashing violently to the floor. The man's gun skittered under a medical cabinet. Penny scrambled on top of him, pinning his chest with her heavy knees, and brought the oxygen tank down hard against the side of his skull. He went completely limp. The second man cursed, drawing his combat blade. But before he could lunge at Penny, a deafening gunshot rang out. The man's chest exploded in a shower of crimson, and he dropped dead onto the floor. Damien stood in the doorway, a tactical flashlight attached to his smoking gun, panting heavily. He looked at the dead Moretti soldier, then at the unconscious man, trapped beneath Penny's substantial weight. The ruthless boss lowered his weapon, a look of profound, terrifying awe washing over his blood-splattered face. Penny scrambled off the man, trembling violently as she rushed to switch on Dante's backup battery. The monitors beeped back to life, steady and strong. Damien walked over, kicking the weapons away from the bodies. He dropped to his knees right in front of Penny, grabbing her shaking hands. They were covered in grease sweat and another man's blood. He didn't care. He kissed her knuckles, his grey eyes blazing with a fierce, unbreakable devotion. "I told you," Damien whispered, his voice vibrating with raw emotion. "You are an absolute warrior. You protected my blood. You saved my family. Twice." Penny looked down at him, her heavy chest heaving, the reality of her new life finally crashing over her. She was no longer just a tired, fat nurse eating cold pasta in a sterile break room. She had crossed a violent, irreversible threshold. "They will keep coming, Damien." She breathed tears mixing with the dirt on her face. "Jessica knows everything." "Let them come," Damien swore, standing up and pulling her tightly against his solid, unyielding chest. His large hands firmly gripped her thick hips, claiming her completely. "I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone touch you. You are mine, Penelope. My nurse, my savior, and my undisputed queen." He kissed her, then a desperate, bruising collision of lips that tasted of smoke, danger, and a terrifyingly beautiful forever. She wasn't just trapped, she was finally undeniably home. The bloody war against the Moretti crime family was just beginning, but as Damien's men secured the perimeter and dragged the bodies away, Penny knew one thing for certain. She would never go back to her small, lonely apartment. She would never hide her curves under cheap scrubs again. The ruthless mafia boss had kidnapped the wrong girl, but he had accidentally found the exact woman he so desperately needed. Did Penelope and Damien's unexpected thrilling tale of mafia danger and forbidden romance keep you on the absolute edge of your seat? If you loved this intense story of the ruthless boss and the courageous curvy nurse who stole his hardened heart, do not forget to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow romance lovers, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, heart-pounding audio stories every single week. Leave a comment below today.